I want you to see here, the interesting thing is while Abram is a stranger, he is an exile, he is a sojourner in this land, what he's been doing is he's been making friends with people who are not necessarily God's people. We've seen this throughout his entire life so far, is that Abram was a godless man, he became God's man, and he still pursues godless men and women throughout his entire life. The Bible, what we call this is hospitality. Many Christians believe hospitality is what we do when we get together with Christians and hang out and eat food. That's called fellowship. Hospitality is what we do when we welcome outsiders, those who are not in the faith. Abram is an outsider in a land that's not his own, and he's also a man who welcomes outsiders. He has 3 allies who are not Christians. They're not God's men. They're not godly men, but they love Abram. And when Abram says, let's go to war, they're ready to go to war. What this tells us about Abram is that he's a man who is welcoming of those who disagree with him or maybe think differently about God or have different ideologies. Or he's a man who knows other people, who's hospitable to other people, and has friendships with other people. This is back in Genesis 14. They're about to go to war. It's hostile. There are people who hate other people. There's wars going on. We're seeing this here in this text. But Abram, God's man, one of the only people up to this point in history that is following God, and at this point, after the flood, after years, generations, what we're talking about here, Abram is God's man. God chose him, God picked him, and God is using him right now. And what he's doing, he's sharing his faith. He's encountering strangers. He has friends who are not Christians. He has friends that don't believe in the same ideology as him. And I want you to see this in the context here, that there's a war going on. People are fighting. And yet God's man is hanging out with people who disagree with him. Ever heard of a time where people were disagreeing and fighting all around? Never heard of that one, right? Like, that's the world we live in. And it's been like this since Genesis 14. I just want you to know that. Like, some of you are like, man, I really want peace. I do too. That's why we need Jesus. That's why we need Jesus. So Abram's able to have these relationships with people who disagree with him, who are actually friends with him, actually want to serve alongside of him. These guys are going to participate in God's mission, and they're not even Christians. Just because you're a part of the church or in the church or serving in the church and doing things among God's people doesn't make you a Christian. Faith in Jesus Christ alone is what makes us Christians.